then let's talk about some of the other ways that narcissists will abuse you financially. Cutting off credit cards, moving assets, preventing career advancement. Let's talk about some of those other things that they'll do.
So certainly, cutting off credit cards is one vehicle, right, to keep somebody essentially under your thumb, right? All of a sudden, you don't have the credit cards that will help you pay for the most basic necessities in your life: food, clothing, childcare, all of those kinds of things, right? And your credit limit used to be limitless when the narcissist was feeling magnanimous, and now you have essentially, the narcissist has decided that you're not on the narcissist side anymore, and so the credit cards get cut, your limits go low, if any, and you're standing at the grocery store and you can't pay for the groceries, or you have now found yourself so isolated, and you don't have those passwords to even understand what the finances are because the passwords have all been changed. The mail is no longer coming to your home. It may be going to the narcissist's office instead. Or, obviously with online, now you don't have any of that access. And so it is really a strategy to keep you under that person's thumb and to keep you dependent on that person.
Yeah. Moving assets is another one.
Moving assets is very difficult, because once the assets start to move, it makes it much more difficult to trace the assets. And so maybe things were in joint names and all of a sudden there's no more money in that bank account. Or maybe you had a brokerage account and the brokerage account has now been moved, or the assets have now been moved into a different brokerage account. Maybe it was in joint names and now it's only in his or her name alone. And so you no longer have access to the funds and the security that you had access to before, which makes you even more dependent. And look, I think at that point, it's time to it's a wake-up call. I think maybe the wake-up call could have happened earlier, but certainly that is the wake-up call. When assets start moving, when someone is even moving assets to other family members or to friends, and you don't have control of that, perhaps things are being moved into trusts, and all of a sudden, somebody is saying to you, just sign here, it's okay, or taking you to an attorney of their choice to just sign here. Those are warning calls that you need to be aware of.
Yeah. And then they play games, like they'll start paying the bills from, your account first, right?
Yes.
They'll deplete that account first.
Yes, that is another strategy, is again taking away your control, right? Your safety line. So if they're paying all of the bills from your account eventually is going to be depleted while their accounts are building, right? And all of a sudden you don't have enough money to actually go to the attorney. You don't have enough money to go to your therapist to have that conversation about what is happening in your life. You don't have the money to move around in the world. I think what people really need to understand, and money sometimes is a dirty word. People don't like to talk about finances, but to work in the world, to move around in this world, you need money. That's just a fact. And if someone is taking your control of your finances away from you, that is a wake-up call that you need to do something.
Yeah. And then they'll start to play games during the case, right? So what they'll do is they will play games with the discovery. So you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So let's talk about what discovery is, first of all, because I think that a lot of our clients, I know when we start actually dealing with discovery, they want to know what it is. So what we do usually at the very beginning of a case is we serve, meaning send, discovery notices to your spouse's attorney. And those have a list of documents that we're going to be looking at. Usually it goes 5 years back. Sometimes it could go longer, but we're looking at credit card statements to see how the spending actually has occurred. Is there spending on other people who maybe are outside the marriage, for example, paramours of some sort? Is there gambling that we need to be aware of? Are there transfers of monies to other accounts? There's lots of ways to look at these documents, but essentially credit card statements statements, bank statements, brokerage statements, statements regarding restricted stock units, bonus and award statements. We want to see it all so that we understand what are the assets, what are the liabilities, and what's the income. And then, of course, what is the lifestyle? Because the lifestyle analysis is going to tell us how much spousal support there will be, or how much spousal support will be paid, right? So we're looking for all of that. So we serve these notices, and then the other side doesn't comply, which is what you're talking about, Rebecca. So maybe they give us a whole pile of documents, but they're not really relevant. And then they tell us, we've given you 5,000 documents, we've given you 50,000 documents. Okay, but it's the quality, not the quantity of the documents, right, that we're looking at. And of course, then there's the person who doesn't give you any documents. And now you are left with lots of discovery notices out there, and perhaps letters to counsel, et cetera, and your bills are escalating. At some point, your attorney should be subpoenaing everything that they can subpoena directly from the institutions, right? So we serve the discovery notice. If we don't get the discovery, we start subpoenaing. We have to be careful about subpoenaing employers, because sometimes that can actually backfire. So we are careful about that. But sometimes we're left with no choice. We have to get the information. So we will subpoena the institutions. One good place to start is the tax returns, because there's usually a schedule in the tax returns that will set forth the dividends and the interest from interest or dividend bearing accounts. And those are great places to start to subpoena.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So she just said so much gold right there. I just want to make sure that we don't gloss over what she just said, because there was so much gold in what she just said that and I just want to make sure that you guys just heard everything that she just said, because as lawyers, I know everything that she just said, but I want to make sure that you guys got to hear everything that she just said. So in a case, there are 5 major areas. I always say 5 major areas. Some people say 4, but I'm going to say 5. So there's property division, and then there's spousal support, and then there's custody, child support, and fees. So those are like the 5 major umbrellas. And when you are looking at the 5 major umbrellas, and every single case has those 5 potential areas, and then there's tangential areas like domestic violence and things like that. But the 5 major areas are those. And in every single case, you have those potential. And if you don't have kids, obviously custody and child support aren't going to be there. But you have those 5 major areas. So when you have some major potential issues, such as waste or business valuations or something like that, then you might have to hire a forensic accountant. And that forensic accountant might need to look at a lifestyle analysis, in order to say, how are we going to come up with what the true income is, or what we need to look at as far as how to come up with, an alimony award or a spousal support award. And so you hire this forensic to help you do that. And what they have to do is they have to actually go back and track every single dollar that was ever spent or ever looked at. And what they do is look at the last 5 years. It's kind of painful, actually. I mean, for them. And, they literally go, how much did you spend on this shoe purchase, or this grocery store purchase, or this, literally every single dollar. And they put it together into what we call a lifestyle analysis. So that's what she's talking about with that. And tracking every single dollar. And so that's what a lifestyle analysis is. How much did you spend on your pets? How much did you spend on your nails? How much did you spend on, literally, that's what a lifestyle analysis is. And it's kind of painful, but that's what it is. It kind of feels like a rectal exam, I think, honestly. But because you never think that that's what's going to end up happening when you're actually doing it until you go through a divorce, and then that's what it ends up being. Um, but you need to know what somebody's true income is in order to come up with, because it's important for alimony, it's important for child support, it's important for a fees claim. So, true income is really, really important for all three of those. So that's what she's talking about for that. Now, when you're talking about subpoenas, so when you actually are trying to get documents from somebody, they can either hand them over voluntarily, but when you're talking about a narcissist, they usually don't. They usually don't. And so what happens is you say, hand over 12 months of bank statements or whatever it is, or 5 years of bank statements. But what happens is they'll hand over everything but December or something like that. And then you're over there going, well, where the hell is December? Or they'll hand over everything except for page 5 or something like that. And you're like, where's page 5? And, and it's just, it's so annoying as hell. And all of that costs money because your paralegal's like looking through it and they go, oh, everything but page 5 is in here. And so you have to go, here's a motion to compel. I need page 5. And it gets extremely expensive and time consuming because you're not allowed to just file the motion to compel. You have to prove that you tried to do it, yourselves first. Well, at least in most jurisdictions you do, right? And so
Good faith, sure.
right. Good faith, try to do it yourself. And then that costs money first. And then you have to, then you can file your motion to compel. So all that costs money. So what she's saying is, instead of doing that, just go straight to, Bank of America and file the subpoena, because at least then, that Bank of America isn't going to piss around. They'll just give you the whole entire statement. That's what she's saying. So it's a little bit more money because Bank of America is going to charge you for the copies, but at least you're going to get the entire statement. So that's what she's saying.
That's 100% correct. Exactly correct. And look, I think that the point of sending the subpoenas in my mind is that sometimes, and I've watched this, right? Lawyer is sending the letter and another letter and another letter. And I'm thinking to myself, why would we be begging for these statements? They're going to come in this beautiful package from Bank of America, for example. They're going to be certified. They can go straight into evidence. They're true and accurate copies, they're business records, and I don't have to now spend all this time begging for my discovery.
Right. And as long as you can get them, I mean, sometimes it's harder because it's an out-of-state subpoena or something like that. It depends on where they're from, right? So sometimes you can't.
Yes.
Now, and what she's saying as far as going to the employer, it can be difficult because if they're self-employed, or if the employer is, their friend or something, because it's a small company, well, then he ain't gonna bother because it's not gonna be probably accurate anyway, But if it's a public company or a big company or something like that, maybe it's worth it to subpoena the records from the employer. So you have to weigh that out.
Yeah, I think that the biggest issue about subpoenaing the records, and you're correct, obviously, if it's a friend, it makes it much more difficult. And I have seen more and more that people can often defer their income, particularly when the business is small. They have, all these different deals going as they're going through the divorce, because their buddy went through the divorce too, right? Okay. And so now they're deferring their income and you're really not getting a true picture of the income. But even when, and you have to be careful about this, and particularly in some counties in New York, they are very strict about it. There are employers who are going to get upset about being subpoenaed. And so you really need to have a very good reason. The person has not complied. I usually like to get court permission to do it, because then it actually informs the court as to what's going on. Somebody has another opportunity to produce the documentation, but at some point you need the documentation, and most employers will understand. Most large corporations and institutions are going to understand, because a lot of people go through divorce, and so they're used to getting these subpoenas.
Yes, but absolutely. But with out of state, you have to go to the court out of state, and you have to, there's a little bit more of some steps that you have to go through.
Yes.
To get that. So it's just a little bit more expensive. It's a little bit more time consuming. Sometimes you have to hire a lawyer out of state in order to help you, a process server out of state. It's just a little bit more difficult to do that. Sometimes it's worth it though. I mean, but you just always have to know and weigh the return on your investment. Don't throw good money after bad, right?
That's exactly right, Rebecca, 100%.
So let's talk about, other things that people should be doing in order to protect themselves. What other kinds of documentation that they should be looking at, emails, texts, that sort of thing. What else can they do?
So look, first and foremost, I think that people need to make sure when they're signing those tax returns that they actually know what they're signing. Because we touched, or you touched on this idea of business valuations, for example. And I think that it's very important that people understand that they actually need to make sure that their tax returns are accurate before they sign them, or before they actually allow the accountant to be filing them. And then they should be keeping copies of them. And they need to also remember that the accountant works, if you're filing joint tax returns, for both of you. So the accountant should be providing you a copy. The accountant should be answering your questions. And you should not be, being put in a situation where you're told, sign here, okay, and you're not able to review it, or sign here and you were given 1 minute to get them to the post office, or to tell the accountant to e-file them. So it's very important that you review those tax returns, because they are an admission, essentially, of what the income is. And if you're being misleading, maybe it's not you who's being misleading, but when you file those joint tax returns with your spouse, you are agreeing to the government that this is your income. And so it's very important that I think first and foremost that you deal with that particular issue. The other issue is making sure that you keep records of bank statements, keep records of the credit card statements. Start to gather essentially your file, so that your attorney is not having to hunt down every single thing that is going on. Those bits and pieces that woman gave me, they made her case. They really did. They were millions of dollars, and they came sometimes on little tiny pieces of paper like this big, okay? But, shredded, okay? But $5 million later, okay, she had found that money, essentially. I mean, look, we did subpoena it, we did find it, but essentially she gave us the breadcrumbs to be able to do that. So start gathering your statements, start gathering the credit card statements, keep your eyes open. I think that these are all important things to be doing.
Yes, your attorney is not a mind reader, and there's not some, a thing out in the sky where your attorney can go to and, find all the information. You have to provide it to your attorney. So, the more information that you can bring to your attorney, the better it's going to be.
I'm going to add something, Rebecca, because it comes up a lot, believe it or not. So very often people decide that they're going to fill out these applications for mortgages or for loans, and they're going to have to state what their income is, or whether they've been given gifts, or whether they've been given loans, and they misstate that information, right? And that often comes back to bite them, right? So for example, a parent may give, the couple or a party a loan. And now they've stated that they have no loans on their application for their mortgage. It was a loan, but they decided to make it into something other than a loan, because they wanted to look more favorable to the mortgage company. And so it's very important that you remember that your words and the things that you sign, the documents that you sign, the documents that you're swearing to, the documents that you're submitting to banks, particularly federally chartered banks, that those are your words and they are your admissions. And so you need to accurately report things, because I will tell you, during a divorce, it will all come back to bite you. One other thing that I think is so important is that people, if they're getting an inheritance, or if they actually are getting a gift from a parent or other family member, that they make sure that that is well documented and that they keep those monies separate and apart. So a lot of people come to us and they have lost what we call separate property in New York. They would have had, for example, they came into the marriage and they had no prenup perhaps, and they have not actually kept their premarital property separate, or they have not kept their inheritance separate. And all of a sudden they have commingled all of these funds. Perhaps they've spent down their inheritance. Perhaps they've spent down their premarital property while they've been saving marital property. All things that you shouldn't necessarily be doing, because if you actually save and keep that separate property separate, you will get a credit at the end if you can trace it. In New York, it is the person who has the separate property claim. It's their burden to trace that separate property in order to get credit for it. But many times people come to us and they have millions of dollars of separate property that they cannot trace. And so it may just be gone. Really important.
Very good advice. Yes, very good advice. And gather those important documents and put them in a safe place. Make copies of them and put them in a safe place.
Yes, yes. Keep them. I think one of my first cases ever was a matrimonial case where the woman had a fabulous prenup. But when she was hospitalized, and when she came back from the hospital, prenup was completely gone. She never saw the prenup again. And the prenup would have been very favorable to her. The attorney was long gone who had drafted the prenup, and nobody was going to be talking about that prenup except for her at that point, and it was gone. So you need to make sure that you keep your documents safe. Make sure that a family member has a copy. Make sure that they are in a place that is not going to just be in your email, and your emails become, are erased, or somebody's gone into your emails and deleted them. Make sure to keep your passwords safe. All of those kinds of things you really need to pay attention to.
Yes, very, very good advice.
It's strings attached. So spending money with strings attached, anything related to kind of giving with expectations of something in return. And I think one thing I'll just say about a lot of the items on our list that we'll talk about today, there's a handful of them that do come up in regular kind of healthy, functional relationships. And so it's not that one of these tricks in and of itself means that you're in an financially abusive relationship with a narcissist. But when you start to see some of these things add up and you've got a little bit of history and a pattern, that's where you can start to kind of identify that these are some of the mind games that they play.
Yeah, I mean, narcissists are inherently extremely, extremely selfish people. They are scarcity mentality to the extreme. So they don't like to part with their money. That's for sure. They're kind of like, they go back to that whole toddler's creed. What's mine is mine. What's yours is mine.
Oh, you just took my number 10.
Oh, always number 10.
That was it. What's mine is mine, and what's yours is ours.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. Yeah, exactly. And so, yeah, I mean, they don't like, if they give you anything, there's definitely massive strings attached, right? I mean, and so what does that mean exactly? If they give you something with strings attached, what does that mean?
It just means they're giving with something with expectations that they're going to get something in return, or that they're giving in order to maintain control. So that's the thing you just have to remember whenever you're dealing with a narcissist, is that really everything that they do is about maintaining control, maintaining dominance. And so even the things that may seem innocuous or like they're just being generous, they're actually not. They're doing it from more of a manipulative point of view. And so whenever there's, a dinner or a gift or any of those types of things, you have to ask yourself, are there some strings attached to it? And if you've been in that relationship for a while, you'll start to be able to differentiate between those very, very easily.
Yeah, there's something they want, or there's some reason behind it, like to, get you to do something or to like maintain control over you or something like that. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. And withholding is like a huge biggie. I mean, they withhold anyway. They withhold information, they withhold just like sometimes they just like they ghost you on like texting you back or um you know just
Yeah,
they
a lot, I
disappear.
think to that point, a lot of the mind games that take place around money are also ones that you'll see take place around other aspects. So it's still all part of kind of that same playbook. Money tends to be one way that a narcissist can use to try and maintain that sense of control. But these types of tricks and all of these tactics that they use, you'll find them appearing in non-financially related aspects as well. Absolutely.
So how will they withhold as far as money is concerned?
Yeah, so like one example is an allowance. A lot, like, it's not that there's no access to money, because to a certain extent, if there's no access to money, then they may actually be shooting themselves in the foot and lose control because they're forcing you to do something more drastic. So a lot of times what they'll do is give a small kind of allowance for all of your personal spending. Usually it's not enough. And we're not talking about a situation, like, it's really common in families that one spouse kind of takes the lead role with managing finances, another one may take the lead role with maintaining the household, and there's really a healthy division of labor based on what your interests are, what your skill set is, where do you have experience, all those types of things. This isn't about that. This is about giving you a specific dollar amount so that if you want anything above that, you've got to come back to them and ask for it, and then they're able to again exert that that additional control, which is certainly going to be a theme of any and all conversations that revolve around narcissists.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And another one for sure is sort of like this passive aggressive thing. And I actually experienced it myself in a business partner relationship. It wasn't, I haven't been in a relationship with a narcissist in a romantic sense, but I did have a covert narcissist in a very short lived, thank God, business situation. And it was like this passive aggressive kind of a thing where hey, weren't you supposed to put the money into this account? And oh, yeah, I didn't know how to deposit it. I have to ask my bookkeeper. So I put it in this other account, my account. And, a couple months would go by and where's the money? How come it hasn't gone into the business account yet? And so I found myself like in this weird position of like, do I ask about it? Do I not ask about it? And then like, I'm sort of like, you know, am I like the bad person because I'm like asking about it? And, and then I ask about it. Oh, I told you I needed to ask my my CPA about it. I'm definitely going to do it. And they kind of make you feel bad. Like, I'm a
And
good person.
that's the thing. You start to, the more as these kind of tactics add up, once you're able to identify it and name it, a lot of that kind of goes away. But until that's crystallized in your mind, it becomes where you start to question yourself. Should I be doing this? Did I do something wrong? Am I making a mountain out of a molehill? All these things kind of start to build up where you start to look internally until maybe you have kind of that light bulb moment of, well, actually, here's what I'm dealing with. I think that's one of the reasons why everything that you do in terms of your content is can be so helpful to people, because it really can help someone to identify what some of these tricks are and be able to name that.
Well, and exactly, because especially the coverts, like, what I was just describing, because like when you mention something about that type of, behavior to somebody else, other people go, well, I'm sure that must have been inadvertent because that person is so nice. Obviously, I'm sure they didn't mean it that way, and then again, it only serves to make you think you're crazy once again. And, here you go back to feeling like bad, and you're ashamed once again, crazy again, and that again, it's this mind game, mind game, mind game, right?
It's,
So,
it's
yeah,
exhausting.
it is. It is definitely exhausting. Definitely exhausting. Okay, so let's talk about. You had some great ones with, how they play this sort of shell game about where they put, you know, debt and title and in whose name and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, those two things kind of go hand in hand. I tend to see when I'm working with clients who talk to me about how they're kind of divorced, their spouse, their husband, wife, whatever, is a narcissist. It's not at all uncommon that I'll see a lot of the debt ends up in your name, and a lot of the kind of title to the assets ends up in their name. This is not something that tends to happen by happenstance. It's really part of the plan to take out credit cards in your name, mortgages, all of the debt. Ultimately, if things go awry and you split, you're going to be kind of stuck holding the bag. Whereas they'll try and convince you to sign a quick claim deed or an interspousal transfer deed in order to take title to the house and put it into their name, or joint. So all of these are things that are trying to basically accumulate the good stuff on their side of the equation and take all the bad stuff and stick that over on your side.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, and one of the things I've seen before too is like, the good spouse or whatever was like the saver, and, saved up all their money, and then the other spouse was like the spender and spent all of their money. And so now they didn't realize that, oh, I'm going to have to hand over half of everything I saved to the person who was just, frittering all their money away. Oh, great. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's a nice lead in for another one, which is kind of the blame and shame. So, a lot of times there's going to be a real double standard in terms of how money is spent. And in those situations, you could go out and spend money for tutoring for little Johnny, or dance class for Sally, or things that are really kind of part of the day to day, and receive a lot of criticism around that. Whereas there may still be, and they're going to be judging you for spending money in kind of the basic ways, whereas they don't expect there to be any repercussions or judgment around their spending money on lavish vacations, or taking trips to Vegas, or whatever it happens to be. That's another one that I see come up a lot, is this double standard around how money is spent.
Yeah, and another thing, actually, as you're saying this, and this kind of goes back to that mind game thing too, is like that sort of shaming you. I mean, there's the double standard for sure, but then there's like that shaming you kind of a thing, like, well, you don't get to spend money because you didn't work for it, or you're just lazy, or you're not capable of earning anything, or you don't have an education, or you're just greedy if you ask for anything. Something like that. Like there's like this inherent sort of thing. And I've had a lot of people who will say to me, like, I'm not greedy, I just want like just enough to like, um cover this, or I'm not asking for this part, or I'm not asking for that, or I'm not asking for any money. Sometimes, like a lot of times people will say, I'm not asking for any money. And almost as if that's dirty, like it's dirty to ask for money.
Yeah.
And and I'll have to like correct people sometimes and go, what's wrong with asking for money? Like,
Yeah.
let's just shift our mindset around that. Let's have a conversation around what's wrong with asking for money if the law provides for you to get half the retirement, or you to get half the assets, or for you to get alimony, or for you to get child support. If the law is providing for that, the law is agnostic.
Right. Really, I mean, it really means that their games have started to wear away at you. They've started to work. That manipulation is paying off because your sense of reality begins to get a little bit skewed, and you start to see things through the lens that they've kind of created for you. All those different smoke and mirrors really kind of start to skew your own sense of self and what's fair and what's equitable. So yeah, and I think the other thing that I see, as you were saying all of those things, is it actually doesn't matter. Like it no matter what the actual circumstances are, they'll find a reason to be able to make you feel shameful. Even if you're making more money, or are more successful, or whatever it is, they're going to find something, an area of weakness, and they're very, very good at that, to be able to kind of exploit whatever insecurities you might possibly have. And if you don't have them, then they'll probably try to create them. And that's kind of how they try to look for their prey to a certain extent.
It's so true. I mean, I had a client one time who was a doctor. She was a hospitalist, and her husband was this guy who had basically been homeless or something. I mean, he was a total loser in a lot of ways. Good looking guy, but really had just kind of banged around, had never really held a good job or anything. And her parents had basically like begged her to come to me to do a consultation. And he was a con artist. He was kind of like that Dirty John guy, and she didn't even end up divorcing him. She was, but during the consult, she was like, this isn't normally who I am. I very, very successful woman. And here she was, like, so bewitched and beholden to this guy who just felt like she was nothing without him, and truly believed that. And here you're looking at it from the outside in, you're like, are you kidding me? Like, seriously? I mean,
yeah.
But
it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of work to be able to kind of peel off those different layers that end up kind of coming on to you, and be able to get back to your true sense of self. It really does take a lot of work.
And just to kind of go back to something you said, a lot of times that shaming and all of that, it hasn't just started during the discard phase, or like right at the time of the divorce or whatever. It started, back at the beginning almost of the relationship. They've started imprinting and conditioning you to believe that you're nothing without them, that no one else loves you like they do, that you can't function without them, that you need them in order to function, like that they have to have control over you. They want you to believe all of those things. And so that's all part of these mind games. And then so like that shaming that they do, for wanting anything for yourself, is that's kind of started, like, I think a long time before sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. It usually doesn't start right away, because if it starts,
oh no, like the love bomb, they have to love bomb. Yeah,
exactly. You gotta get it going a little bit, but then after they've pulled you into their web,
Yeah.
that's when they really start playing those games.
Yeah. 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 So, all right. So what can they do about it? Let's shift to what can they do about
Yeah,
it?
absolutely. I mean, I think to me, the first and most important thing is to be able to name it. You need to be able to kind of come to grips with the reality of who you're married to, in a relationship with, have a business partnership with, whatever type of relationship it is. You need to be able to kind of call a spade a spade. Until you can do that, you really can't begin to take any sort of steps to be able to address anything else, because you're actually not able to see reality for what it is. So that, I think, is the first and kind of most important thing to do. The second one is holding your cards close to the vest. And so, what you need to understand is anything that you reveal can and will be used against you. This is very much like if you're talking to a police officer. You're not going to say anything that's going to end up helping you in that situation. The more information that you reveal, the more transparent that you are, the more that's all going to come back kind of to bite you, because they're going to use that information. They're observing, and kind of taking mental notes about, well, how can I use this for leverage? How can I exploit this weakness? All of that is really part of the game. So you want to make sure that you aren't more transparent than you need to be, and more forthcoming than you need to be.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I know, like, when I decided to try to exit like the business relationship that I was in, I was like, I mean, I told this person I wanted to be out of the relationship, but, I had to be really, really careful about, how much to reveal about what I was working on otherwise, or whatever, because I mean, they need as much narcissistic supply as they can. And, they attach themselves to you because they want that supply. And if there's any supply to be had that's happening around you, they want to make sure that they're not going to be missing out on that. So, you got to be
Yeah.
careful about, what to reveal there. And
What
if
did
there's,
you
go ahead.
what did you have any steps that you took that were particularly effective in getting out of it? Was it tough to kind of
Well, I
remove
mean, you
yourself
just
from that partnership?
I mean, you cannot allow yourself to be emotionally triggered, because they are definitely going to try to trigger you. And you can't look back. I mean, I was just talking to a client the other day, and she was like, well, maybe because the guy was like back into like trying to love bomb her into coming back into the relationship, and she's like, maybe I could just keep him in the love bomb stage. I'm like, no, 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 no. That is not happening. They don't like the love bomb stage. Like, you're not going to be able to do that.
If you figure that out, let us know.
Yeah, like, no, it's not happening. So like, I mean, I just was like, no matter what, I'm moving forward and I'm getting the hell out of this thing. And and it always gets worse before it gets better, and they're always horrible at the end, because they don't want to see their narcissistic supply walking out the door.
They feel the control slipping through their fingers.
Well, yeah, they're feeling their supply walking out the door. I mean, it's like they're vultures, and so they're seeing their food source like leaving.
Yeah.
And it's funny because they're horrible to you, and yet they want you to stay. Like, why would I stay when you were horrible? But yet that's how they are. But you just got to keep going and not look back, and then cut off all forms of communication, like block them on every single platform. And and really, for me, like, I just tried to like not even have any communication with anyone who was in communication with that person. Like, I really tried to do that as well, so that there was no possible form of communication. That's what worked best for me. But I was lucky. I it wasn't a romantic situation, and
no kids. There
No
were all
kids.
these kind of all of this different entanglement that you can't find a way to truly sever.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, when it's a divorce situation, it's like, I'm sure so much worse, so much worse. Um, so what else can you
Yeah,
say?
other steps. I mean, I think, it's really is kind of a cat and mouse game. And so in that sense, the narcissist is the cat and you're the mouse. And so you really need to understand, you don't want, as a mouse, you don't want to become a cat, but you really need to understand how a cat thinks, how they operate, how they pursue their prey, in order to be able to stay one step ahead. There was someone that I was interviewing at one point around kind of financial abuse in narcissistic relationships, and the analogy that she used with the victims of this financial abuse was that of a rose. And so the idea there was, a rose has thorns. A lot of people, when they're leaving a narcissistic relationship and trying to get out, they end up kind of overcorrecting. They have a tendency to overcorrect in the other direction. And so now they kind of put up all of these defense mechanisms, because you start to understand that you're, by being vulnerable, that's what kind of exposed you to this relationship. And so I really like the analogy that she used with the rose and the thorns, because a rose is a rose and it has thorns. And so the idea there is, you can kind of you want to be able to identify the people that you need to have your walls up with, that you aren't vulnerable with, that you don't reveal information, but you don't want that to seep into all of your other relationships that are good quality relationships with people, where that vulnerability really is what enables you to have some of those close relationships. So it's not that you're changing your identity, it's that you actually have both of these things. You have the beautiful flower and you have the thorns. And so I thought that was kind of a really powerful, compelling metaphor in a sense.
Yeah. I mean, I would definitely say, gather as much financial information as you can before you leave the house, if you can. Um, you know,
Stockpile cash. You
Definitely
absolutely want to.
stockpile cash. Definitely, go around them if you can, like by just going straight for the subpoenas and that sort of thing, rather than, trying to get it out of them through a request for productions or something, because they're always going to play this stupid game of giving you part of it or not giving you it at all, whatever. For sure. There's always going to be this little, um, you know, um, game, as far as giving you documentation during the actual court case, for sure.
And you need to
Um,
decide in that sense of like, what's the right path? Does mediation make sense if you're divorcing, an extremely rigid narcissist, or are you really just setting yourself up for a situation where you kind of are going to have a choice of kind of agreeing with all of their demands, and even then they're going to kind of move the goalpost, move the goalpost, because the closer they get to done, the closer they are to, like you said, losing some of that narcissistic supply.
well, I mean, if you have enough leverage, through the SLAY program, maybe mediation would definitely work. But it just depends, sometimes it's a good idea. I mean, a lot of times it's a good idea.
Yeah, and
Um,
I think it's not one size fits all, right? So
yeah.
I don't mean to imply that mediation is not a good path, in that type of situation. It's just, you really have to be realistic.
And you have to be
I think,
ready. You have to be
yeah,
ready, for
yeah, there's a
sure.
lot of situations where someone's self-represented or mediation, and they spend so much time and money trying to make a process work that just may not
Right.
have a
You
chance.
definitely have to know what you're doing, for sure.
Exactly.
What are the kinds of tricks that they
A
pull?
lot of narcissists really like to use money as a tool for power and control and leverage. Um, and so I think just sometimes just recognizing that it's not about the money and that it's about the power and the control can be helpful in normalizing. In terms of some of the tricks and going along the control theme, a lot of times they have all the access to everything. And so I think, I mean, what I see a fair amount is that translates into they have entire visibility over all of the finances, but then you don't have any access. So they have control over all spending, et cetera, those types of things. And so I think one of the approaches that can be helpful, not necessarily if you're going through divorce, but a little bit before then. And tell me if that's in the right track, but I imagine you probably have people that are contemplating divorce. But
Yeah, I think
sometimes I
that's
think one thing
perfect.
that can be really helpful is if you're able, as you're trying to save the marriage, to convince them to sign up for one of these platforms like a Personal Capital or Mint or things of that nature that have account aggregation, so you can see kind of all of the finances at once. And if you can do it in the way of like, this is really a hot button for me, and that we don't have transparency, and so like it'd be really helpful for us to work on our marriage. And so you're still kind of giving them this semblance of control, but that can be a good way to backdoor your way into having visibility over all the finances, at least with what they're willing to add to the Personal Capital account. So that's something that I find can be kind of pretty effective there.
Well, those are both really, really good. Really, really good. I was just thinking, hiding money, they tend to, be the ones that'll move money offshore or put it in separate accounts or get paid in cash. And what happens is they've been working on their target for so long that the target ends up kind of feeling paranoid anyway, and feeling like the other person has all the control. And so they kind of have this imagination that there's all this stuff going on, and it may not be as bad as they might think, but they just imagine all the worst things, like, there's millions of dollars offshore, or there's millions of dollars being paid in cash. And their income is 5 times what they say it is. And, so I think part of it is, just kind of looking at the facts, and also saying, okay, in today's day and age, it's not as easy to hide money, and money usually has a trail. You can usually see wires going places. I mean, it's really hard to move money around without some kind of traceability. I mean, there's going to be some weird wire to some bank in the Cayman Islands or Nevis or something that you're going to see, or some big amount of cash that was taken out, and there's no way to account for what happened to it. So that's what I usually tell people. It's not as easy to hide money as people think that it is.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I often suggest for people that, because like you said, people can kind of work themselves into a tizzy where the fear of the unknown becomes this massive problem and kind of manifests into a massive problem that may or may not exist. And so sometimes what I think is the best way to evaluate that relatively quickly, because the decision is primarily, I've got this lingering concern. Am I going to be able to move forward with this lingering concern or not? And so you then have options to address that concern. You can hire a private investigator and do, a world search of different bank accounts and see if something like that comes up. You can do, full forensic accounting and tracing, but all of those things come with pretty hefty price tags. And they also take your case in a direction that can make it really, really difficult to resolve amicably, if the event that is, a possible outcome, which often isn't the case when you're divorcing a narcissist, but in some cases, that does work. And so, something that we often do is like the smoking gun analysis, which doesn't get to it's not a full tracing, but it's more just trying to look at all financial records for a year and do a real rounded corners that say, how much did we make? What happened in terms of the return on investment? And does it make sense for us to be where we're at? Because at the end of the day, your starting balance and your ending balance, The difference between those two are going to be based on gains or losses during that period, total income, less total expenses. So when you do that kind of smoking gun analysis and you look and you see how much in expenses does this imply that we had, is that in the ballpark? So, if you look at it and you say, I think we're spending 15 or 20,000 a month, and then you look at this type of analysis and it's showing 50 or 60,000 in implied expenses, then maybe there's something there that should cause you to do a real deeper dive, ask for 6 years of documents, bring in a private investigator, go further down. So that's often what we do. We call it kind of the smoking gun analysis of just trying to do it a little bit, kind of
like a back end way.
approach, right?
Y-
Poor man's
Yeah,
way.
you back your way into it. I like that approach. That's good. And another thing, which is kind of like similar to what you were just saying, is like, if the person is paid all from one source, like a company, and the person is not paid in cash, maybe there's a C-level executive of some sort, but maybe they do get paid in many different ways. Maybe it's, restricted stock units, or maybe it's, I've had C-level executives that get paid in, various, like one was an Indian owned company that the guy was like living in Brazil, but he worked for the American portion of the company. And so like some of his retirement stuff was in rubles, and then some of it was in like Brazilian rios, and some of it was in American dollars. And so, but it all came from one source, the company. And so one of the things that I've done is subpoena the company and say, give us a breakdown of every single dollar this person has earned, or every single, bonus or stock or whatever. And, where did it go? Which bank accounts did this person direct it to go into? Give us the exact checking account, routing number, the bank name, because you go right to the source and figure out, okay, how much was made. And okay, here are the expenses, and so here's how much should be left over here, what's missing here.
Yeah. I think to that point, I think step one is really understanding the compensation structure. Subpoenas
Right.
often are a more efficient way of getting to the bottom of things if you don't have full disclosure, or you often will get a very organized packet back from the company, as opposed to bankers' boxes of documents that have been pieced together. So in some ways it can actually be more efficient. It does take things in a little different slant. But the other thing that I think is really important is that people get educated, because to your point, I don't think that I think a lot of people don't necessarily have a full understanding of how things like RSUs and stock options and how much people pay in taxes. And so, like, I've seen plenty of situations where someone said, hey, I think my husband's hiding money. Look, like here it says that 1,000 RSUs vest, and I only see 400 shares in the account. Well, 400 of them were withheld for taxes. And then I see that you sold 200 shares. And so a lot of times there actually is a good explanation. And so
Absolutely.
trying to get educated, and stock options are another great one, because sometimes there's actually no money that came into the account. It might just have been an outflow because you exercised the options but didn't sell. So yeah, those are really,
or maybe they haven't even vested yet. Maybe they won't vest for another 5 years. And if the person isn't with the company in 5 years, they're not going to even get them. So if they're not ripe, then maybe they're not even something that would be put into the pot to be divided, So, I mean, there's that. But, I think what happens is people get caught up in the cash element of things a lot of times. But, it's like, do you want to spend $10,000 on a forensic accountant to recover 5,000 or whatever? I mean, how much cash are we really talking about a lot of times?
and the other thing
unless they're,
I think one of the other tricks that a lot of people do is put a bank account actually in their spouse's name. That's the other thing that I've seen happen quite a bit. And then
or a new significant other, or their brother, or their parent, or something. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
But in particular in their spouse's name, because then usually they actually have full access and control to it because they were the one that said
Well,
no.
I'm thinking in a divorce situation, if they're not liking their spouse very much at that moment.
So am I. So am I. This is so
Yeah, well,
one of the private
I
investigators.
mean, but then it's easier to get for them to get access to it. So I'm saying like they put it in a place where, hey, that's my mother's account. I can't touch that. That's, you know, that's her money.
Well, no, they
I
but they
mean,
have no idea about it. So
yeah.
this way, it's a way for them to get away from the I was the one that hid money, because they're almost placing it
Oh
more,
yeah.
you're the one that was
Yeah,
hiding.
yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah,
And
yeah,
the
yeah.
other thing that I think people do quite a bit in terms of just the financial abuse is you need to be cognizant if you drive a Tesla. Anything that has a computer in it can be a tracking device and
Yeah, yeah.
used to triangulate in terms of location, which is part of kind of that financial control dynamic. All
Perfect. All
right.
right. Thank you.
Bye.
So explain more about this feminine, masculine, and
Sure.
the narcissist trying to steal your power. So, in other words, if you are a powerful woman and you're in a relationship with a man who is trying to steal your power, are you saying that that woman is going to have a harder time making money because she is giving her power to that man because she is holding that money power away from herself? Explain
So,
that.
so let me give you an example. Whenever I hear someone saying I support him, I'm pay for everything, I already know there's an imbalance in that relationship. She's in her masculine, and he acts like he's an alpha, but he's a beta, you know. So there's a really such situation like that where you'll see a woman. My mother supported all of us. She put me through law school, helped with law school, put my brother through med school, and I think part of her was guilt too because she knew she needed to get out of that marriage, which she's finally getting divorced from him, which I'm so happy. But
Yeah, well, she watched a lot of my videos, by the way.
she
I think you
did.
said
She
that's how
did.
you recognized me. That's how we met.
Yeah, well, it's crazy because I told my mom to go watch you actually, and I remember seeing her. I'm like, I actually watched your videos, to be quite honest with you, because I was looking up Narcissist and I saw you and I'm like, this lady is
Yeah, no, because we were
amazing.
at that club, and you were like, "I know
Yeah.
you." It was so
Yes. Oh my
crazy.
God, it was
Oh yeah.
amazing.
So anyway, we're
So
digressing.
anyway,
Go ahead. I want
so
to because I really want to hear this. This is really fascinating to me.
so so women who are a lot of single moms are predominantly in their masculine energy.
No, no, let's say they're in a relationship with a husband, and you're
Okay,
saying like,
if he's not working, most of the
or
time,
say he's working, but he makes a lot less.
right, that's what I'm saying. There's an imbalance in there. And so
Okay.
usually it's because they feel entitled, like you should be taking care of them.
Or like he makes a lot less, but yet he is like treating her badly because of it,
Yes. Yes.
because he
Well,
feels jealous or something.
she's always going to be feeling like she owes him and to help support him. And so she's always going to be over delivering on her love and feeling like she's got to keep taking care of him because there's that factor that comes in that toxic relationship of feeling sorry for them, right? Because they're always going to have a story of what's happening, why they can't afford what, or they want to live a bougie life because they'll always act flashy. They'll always be like, they acting like they have more than what they do because they want people to look at them that they're successful. Meanwhile, they're leaning on another woman to help them being successful. So there's one avenue like this. But you take a woman out of that situation and you take a high achiever, and she could be married and in a relationship. But what her relationship with money is based upon is her relationship with the masculine energy. And many of the times, most of my clients have trauma. They have some level of trauma and toxicity that's happened to them in their lives. It could come from the mother's masculine, because a lot of my clients do have narcissistic moms, and it could come from the man. When a woman does not feel safe with like safe masculine, with any masculine energy, she won't feel safe with money. Because what money does for us is it provides us a roof over our head, gives us security, makes us feel safe. And once we have a certain amount of it, we feel relaxed a little bit. Okay, we're safe now. But really, it's a false sense of safety, because the moment that money could go away, you're back into that like fight or flight mode, and you're feeling anxious, right? So it's being able to feel safe even if you don't have the money, but with the masculine energy. Until you could heal your toxic patterns with the masculine, which usually looks a lot like a traumatic, narcissistic relationship, attachment issues and whatnot. Until you can heal through that, the chances of you feeling super safe with money doesn't happen. So you'll see women who are even making 8 figures still feeling in this scarcity, because there's abundance and scarcity is a victimhood, right? You'll still see them with their patterns coming through in their business, in the way they operate with money, how they hire staff members, who they allow in their place. And it's so interesting, because when someone tells me something about how they believe about money, I can really trace it back to the trauma. I can trace it back to the relationship with the I'm having a blanket with the narcissistic or the unhealed masculine in their life, their toxic masculine in their life. I can always trace it back to them not feeling safe. But the flip side of this is that they're very successful in executing and doing things and getting things done. But we want to take it to the next level, be executing, but also then feel safe. Now, when my clients go through my program and they come through me, like just recently, a client said she was born in poverty, had a lot of trauma, a lot of toxic relationships. I finally feel safe with money. I know that when I spend it, when I use it, it comes back even more. Like there's no attachment, no power there, like where money has power over us. And what I mean is, like, a lot of people want to do things like maybe invest in your program, Rebecca, or do other things. But you know what? I don't have the money. When the money comes in, I'll do that. When the money shows up, I'll do that. But really what you're doing is giving money that power instead of you having the power over it. But once you can heal that underlying relationship, your relationship with money changes.
So what's the first step?
The first step is identifying that you do have one. Like, what is your real relationship with money? And then I would instantly go and find out where your relationship is with the masculine in your life. Are you feeling safe with that masculine? Do you feel safe, with masculine energy? Are you always the person in control? Because being a control freak, being hyper micromanaging, being a perfectionist, with some other things I could think of, maybe even a people pleaser, or identifying your inability to feel safe and allowing money to come in, because you're always trying to control how it comes in instead of being in that feminine and just trusting. So the first thing is I would identify your relationship. Do you feel safe investing? Do you feel safe in spending? And a lot of people say, oh yeah, I do. But when I really look on it, do you buy things for yourself just because, or do you buy things out of a necessity? Because when you can buy things that you actually like, oh, I just love that, I want to buy it, you have a different relationship with money, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so identify your relationship, and then look to see your patterns with the masculine in your life. It could be from your father, it could be for your mother. Do you have a safe relationship? Is there a toxic relationship there that needs to be healed and worked through? Because once you can, you will bring more abundance in your life.
Mm. Yeah. Okay. I love that. And so for people who don't have a healthy relationship with that masculine in their life, what do you recommend that they do?
Well, it first starts with us, right? Because we want to take our power back. If I always say this, the Taylor Swift, if you realize, I'm the problem, then you're the solution. So the moment that you can identify that you have the power in you to change, it's getting out of that victim mindset every day, just rewiring your belief systems of realizing that, you know what, I can do something different. I can change this. So I definitely would start with that process.
Yeah. Okay. So narcissists and their money. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. I mean, they talk about narcissists and fools and their money and how they're never soon parted. And narcissists and their money, my God, you cannot pry narcissists away from their money. Like, it's insanity and their money, especially when it comes to fighting. When the relationship breaks down, whether it's a business relationship, a divorce, or whatever. I mean, talk about prying it out of their cold, dead hands. They hoard their money like no one else, hoard it and hide it. And why? Why are they like that? I mean, they are so cheap. Why are they like that? Well, I mean, there are so many reasons. For one thing, you have to understand the personality type. So let me explain the personality type. You have to picture somebody who is completely and totally empty inside. This is a person who is basically starving, gasping for breath, desperate for air. This is a person who's basically like starving and in survival mode all the time. You have to picture a person who has like a black hole inside of them, and they want you to fill it, and you might want to fill it too, but they can't receive. So you're left feeling depleted, and yet they're still starving. And so you're feeling totally and completely empty and depleted, and yet they're still starving and wanting more and more and more, because there's this black hole, because they can't receive. Okay, so that's why they're in survival mode all the time, and it cannot be fixed. And so it's scarcity to the utmost extreme, and that's how they feel. Okay, and you can't fix it. You cannot fix it. They're like vultures needing an endless amount of this narcissistic supply, and they're always searching for more of it and always searching for a better source of it. So money just symbolizes a source of that supply. And remember, they need grandiosity, they feel entitled. And so all of that, represents power. It represents a way of looking like they can be powerful. It also represents control. They can control people through money. So the more they have, the more control they have, the more power they have, and the more they can be powerful over people, the more people adulate them, which they certainly love that. They want more adulation. So the more they have, the more entitled they are, the more people are fawning at their feet. And so obviously that becomes very, very addictive to them, very alluring to them. They want that, and they don't have any empathy for others. So they want more and more and more of this, and they step on whoever they have to get more and more of this. So they're chasing this as much as they possibly can on the way up, a lot of them. So this is one of the reasons that they hoard this, and then they're going to hide this. Now, what happens when the relationship breaks down? Well, you become public enemy number one, of course. I mean, because you're either for them or against them. So when you become public enemy number one, they're going to want to destroy you. So now they're going to try to hide it. They're going to try to hoard it. They're going to use it against you. They're going to want to destroy you with it. And they're going to want to make sure that you don't get any of it. Of course, they don't want to give you any of that money that they earned. They feel entitled to it. They don't think that you should have one single dollar of it. Even if you help them get it, they think that they are entitled to it. I mean, that's just their personality. So that's how they are. And they believe that it belongs to them and that you shouldn't have any of it. You should feel guilty for taking anything from them, and that you should, in fact, feel appreciative for what they earned and what they did for you. And you should be grateful for what they did for you. And that's part of it too. And remember, a lot of narcissists also have a very addictive personality. The more they get, the more they want, the more they have. And so they're trying to hoard it as well. And then the other thing about money is that as they get older, they will lose their looks. It does help with them to have more money because they will have more power And as they have more power, even though they don't have the looks, they have this power, they have this control, they have all of this money. And so people will want to be with them because they have this money. Narcissists absolutely hate to be alone. And if they have lots and lots of money, people will still want to be with them. It helps with that as well, because they will not have as much with the looks, so people will still want to be around them, and because they don't feel like people will ever want to be with them just for them. So they feel like they have to have some reason that somebody's going to want to be with them. So they feel like people will only want to be with them if they have money or power. And so they need money so that somebody's going to want to be with them for that when they get older, or they need to have looks or something. So money will give them the ticket for people to want to be with them when they get older, because they're going to lose their looks or something like that. So they feel like if they have lots and lots of money and control and power when they get older, that people will want to be with them. So those are some reasons that narcissists hoard their money. They just feel like it's a way for them to have whatever it is that they want in their life. It's their ticket to get people to do things, to get people to adulate them, to have control over people. So of course, it's their ticket for control and power and everything that they want in life, because they feel totally and completely empty inside. So it gives them that external sense of value. So that's why they hoard it. A number of different reasons.